All right. Good afternoon. It's Mike Watkins. Hey, I've been doing those text updates, but I figured it'd be easier just to do a quick video update instead and just kind of show you what I've been trying to write about over the last couple of days. So this is a current satellite image of Dorian. It's basically an update every minute from the new satellite that's up there. And as you can see by looking at it, it's pretty obvious that it's become better organized since yesterday. There's a couple things to look at. One is the eye is round, which wasn't the case for the last history of the storm pretty much. But the other thing, and this is probably the most important harbinger of additional strengthening, is that there's a good space between the eye and the outside of the storm. So it's inside what's called the CDO, or the central dense overcast. And now that this has formed, this structure, there's really no reason to think that it won't continue to get better organized. There's excellent outflow aloft, there's plenty of warm water in front of it, and there's no obvious reason it wouldn't strengthen. So given the time of year and everything else that's out there, I don't think that's really any question. It's going to be a strong hurricane for several days to come. The question is, where's it going to go, right? So the first thing I want to point out, and this is actually important, is yesterday at this time when we were looking at the satellite imagery, Dorian was going to spread out in this kind of direction here, southeast to northwest. Now that essentially we woke up this morning, instead the storm is more oriented east to west. That suggests that the steering currents north of the storm are starting to push it westward, and in fact there has been a little bit of additional westward motion with the storm today. We think that's going to continue. It should make a full turn and move almost due west for the next 2 to 3 days, approaching the central or northern Bahamas, and after that, well, we'll see, and that's what I'm going to bring up next here. So this is an old set of tracks from earlier today. This is from this morning's model run, but and the new ones aren't available yet, but or they're available. I can talk to them. They're just not available in my little map yet. But notice here, this is actually the GFS model. It's an old abbreviation, stands for AVN, and the model had been bringing the storm all the way across the peninsula and slowly north over the next day or two, and that's what, next 5 days, and that's what the European model was suggesting to overnight tonight. But there's been a subtle shift in this thinking. So these are the other models. There wasn't more than two that didn't show a landfall in Florida in 5 days or less. But now both the GFS and the European model show a movement something like this right up the coast of Florida, so that in 5 days or so, we'd be looking at a storm perhaps up in Jacksonville or even further north. And in the case of the European model, it actually never, from what we can tell in the model, brings the center inland over the United States. So let's get into a little bit more detail on why this is both good news and probably random and not anything that we can hang our hat on quite yet. So let's see. Got to remember how to transition to, there we go. Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is the GFS model prediction 72 hours from now. What I've done is included a map of the steering features in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, the things that drive the storm around. So what we're seeing here in this is a drop or a trough of low pressure. And if you drew a cold front behind it, it would look something like that. All right. So the atmosphere is moving this way, west to east, as the rotation of the Earth goes, right? So in this situation, there's not much of a ridge holding Dorian to the south anymore. And in fact, it's already started to gain latitude from the previous forecast location. But in fact, there's an opening that it's trying to find to move out. And that's called the Coriolis effect. The spin of the Earth means that anything down here in the lower latitudes, just by nature, wants to spin out and to the right. So in order to keep the storm down there, you have to have a force acting upon it. And in this case, it's been a ridge that looks something like this out over here, right? Kind of blocking its forward movement. But in about 3 days' time, there looks to be an opening in the ridge to let Dorian start to move. So as we move to the next day, you see again, still a little bit of ridging here, but not much out this way. So Dorian is going to slowly continue to move up. so that by 120 hours, which is 3 days from now, it's there either inland over Florida near Jacksonville or just off the coast, depending on the model solution. Now, so again, that's good, but this is something that we've been seeing off and on over the last couple of days. It just so happens now the GFS and the European model are both showing this movement. So I'll take you to the European model real quick. Here it is in 72 hours. Note it's positioned there near Florida, just south of Lake Okeechobee, just offshore. The GFS at the same time, little bigger storm, little further north. So in this case, there's a little bit more of a northward component with the American model. The higher resolution GFS, or sorry, European model has a little bit less northward movement up to that point. But look at the trough here. This trough is actually stronger than the one we saw from the GFS model. It's in the same general location, but in this case, see where I've drawn that yellow line, it has already passed the longitude of the storm in the GFS, but not, I'm sorry, in European, but not here. And that's going to be the subtle difference in how the model ends up handling this, because as we go to 120 hours from now that trough has fully grabbed the storm and kept it just off the coast of Florida. So if you look at this deterministically and you say, wow, looks like we're off the hook, you can't do that for a couple of reasons. One, this demonstrates why all of Florida needs to pay attention to the storm continuously. Just because now we've got two different models that both have the same general idea on what the storm is going to do doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. It just means that's the best forecast that they can make, knowing what we know now. As we go forward in time, tomorrow, Sunday, Monday, the models will have known what's happened in between now and then, and also will have less time to predict the new things that will happen. So at this point, the uncertainty is probably just as high as it was earlier. And in fact, if we look at the Hurricane Center's cone of uncertainty from this morning, which is the most recent forecast that they have, there isn't a whole lot of difference between their forecast and what we just saw in the models. The only difference is really instead of the turn happening to the north, once it gets near Lake Okeechobee, for example, and starts heading northward, it happens out here just before you get to the coast. And that's 5 days from now. And the difference or 4 days actually from now, and the difference between those, honestly, is probably 60 nautical miles or a degree of longitude at the most. That's well within the known error rates of these models at that lead time. So just because it shows something that looks encouraging for us in South Florida and maybe not so encouraging for the folks up in Jacksonville, doesn't mean that's when it's going to happen. That just means, again, it's the best solution that the model has now. So what are we going to look for over the course of the next few days to determine if the good news continues? And really the thing is we want to see a trend now. So to give you an idea, the last several global model runs of the Euro have done something like this. Somebody's sending me a text. And now we've got this subtle difference out there, right? So that's the difference between maybe the last 4 or 5 runs and today. But sometimes when you have one of these things happen, just like yesterday, the European model had this storm down here like till Wednesday of next week, right? But the next run after that slowdown went away. Sometimes things like that happen. I mean, we're dealing with a chaotic planet and we can't measure everything, right? So the probabilities of us receiving a hurricane here in Southeast Florida probably won't change much, if at all, in the next advisory. The probability of getting a hurricane up in Jacksonville hasn't probably changed that much either. And to give you an idea, right now, the probabilities for this part of the state in the next 5 days are about 50%. Probabilities up here are about the same as they are in the Keys, which is 5%, 8%, 9%, something like that. So there's still a tremendous amount of time and uncertainty left to go with this storm, and what we're hoping for is to continue to see the model provide the solution, or maybe even start to move it off the coast a little bit faster, right? So if we started to see a turn near or over the Bahamas as opposed to closer to the coast, that would be great news. That'd be the best news you could possibly ask for. But as this continues to move closer, further west it gets without getting south, the more of a problem it's going to be for Florida down the road, probably. So all we can do, unfortunately, is sit here and wait and watch like we've been doing over the last, I don't know, it seems like 7 or 8 weeks now. But in all honesty, no one knows. The atmosphere is a chaotic thing. Little features, tiny little features, could ultimately influence the direction that Dorian goes. So we don't know for sure that it'll be a major hurricane, but there's nothing that we know about that would stop it, right? The same thing with the track here. We know that it's going to continue to move westward for a few days. The question is really, when does it stop moving to the west and toward us and start moving to the north and maybe even east and away from us? We're just going to have to wait and see on that. I wish I had a better answer. So that's it for this update. What I'll do is post this on my website and then send a link to you. Of course, now that you've watched this video, you know that that's what I'm going to do. But I'll continue to do that process over the next few days. I used to do this for hurricanes back in the early 2000s, and I've stopped. I don't know why, but it just seems like this is a good format if you can sit through and listen to it. So thanks for watching. Good luck. Now's the time to kind of get your stuff prepared. We're about at the 4-day mark. We're not going to probably see a tropical storm or hurricane watch tonight, but you can charge the batteries on your cordless drills. You can make sure you know where the things that you need are to put your shutters up and get them organized now. You can certainly by now make sure you have gas and food and water because you don't necessarily need to throw those things out if we don't get a hurricane. There's another system that just emerged from the coast of Africa that's going to develop probably over the next several days. Probably not going to be a threat to land, but you never know. It's just the start of the peak of the hurricane season, so stay ready. We'll ride this Dorian guy out, and we'll either have a great Labor Day weekend or a sweaty one with no AC. We'll see how things turn out. Thank you for watching.